This is your 5th 6 weeks test review. So some of this is fairly current, some of it is a little while back, but hopefully you remember. Number 1, first thing I check to see is if my parentheses are smushed or not smushed. And they're not smushed, which means I'm not multiplying these two things together. So I'm not going to start distributing. So I look to see if there is anything to distribute in front of the first set of parentheses, and there's not. I look to see if there's anything to distribute in front of the second set of parentheses, and there's not. So then I just start combining like terms. I combine my x squareds first. So 4x squared plus 2x squared makes 6x squared. Then there's no other x besides this 8x, so it just drops. And then I combine the negative 3 and the negative 5, and that combines to give me negative 8. Okay, number 2. First I look to see if my parentheses are smushed or not. And they're not smushed together. So I'm not distributing the 2x squared with all of these and the negative 3x with all of these. I'm just going to see if there's anything in front of the parentheses to distribute. And right here, I have to distribute this negative, or I can think of it as a negative 1. If I do that, that would give me a negative 5x squared, a positive 4x, and a negative 2. Distributing a negative or a negative 1 just changes all the signs of everything in the parentheses. And then whatever was in the first set of parentheses, that just drops. I don't do anything different with that. I just recopy it. And then I start looking for like terms. So first I'm going to combine my x squareds. So 2x squared minus 5x squared makes a negative 3x squared. Then I'm going to combine my x's. A negative 3x and a positive 4x makes a positive x. And then I combine my constants, and a positive 4 and a minus 2 makes a positive 2. And there it is. Okay, number 3. First thing I check for is if my parentheses are smushed. And this isn't quite like number 1 and 2, so that doesn't quite apply. So I need to distribute this 5hk with both things in the second set of parentheses. So first I multiply the 5 and the 2, which makes a 10. And then I'm going to multiply the h with the h squared, which will make h to the third because I'm adding exponents. Then I multiply the k and the k, which makes k squared because I'm adding exponents. Then I take 5 times the negative 6, which makes negative 30. Then I multiply h times h, which makes h squared. Then I multiply k times k, which makes k squared. And then I have to take the 5hk times this positive 3. So 5 times 3 makes 15. There's no other h to multiply with, so I recopy the h. There's no other k to multiply with, so I recopy the k. And there it is. If any of these were like terms, I would go ahead and combine them, but none of them look exactly alike. They have to have same variable with same exponent in order to be able to combine them. Okay, number 4. I could do this a variety of ways. I decided that I would go ahead and write it twice. 3x minus 7 quantity squared means 3x minus 7 times 3x minus 7. I have to write it twice. And then I can FOIL this or double distribute, however you like to think of it. So first I take the 3x times both things in the second set of parentheses. So that would give me 9x squared minus 21x. Then I have to distribute the negative 7 with both things in the second set of parentheses. And that would give me a negative 21x and a positive 49. And then I can combine like terms. I can combine my negative 21x and my negative 21x, and that makes a negative 42x. Everything else just recopies. Okay, number 5. It gives me the width and the length of a rectangle, and it asks for the perimeter and the area. So perimeter is 2 times the length plus 2 times the width. So that's what I did here. I took 2 times my length, and I took 2 times my width. I distributed the 2, That gave me this step right here. From here I combine like terms. 8x and a 4x makes a 12x, and a negative 6 and a positive 10 makes a positive 4. And I could also just, imagine this in my head. It's this plus this plus this plus this, because perimeter is the distance around an object. So I just add up all four sides, the lengths around all four sides. So this would happen twice. This one would happen twice. So this plus this plus this plus this. I could just do that. Okay, area is length times width. So I smush my length and my width together. Since they are smushed, I have to FOIL or double distribute. So first I distribute the 2x with both things in the second set of parentheses. And that will give me 8x squared minus 6x. Then I distribute the 5 with both things in the second set of parentheses. And that will give me a positive 20x minus 15. From here I can combine my x's in the center, and a negative 6x and a positive 20x makes 14x. Everything else just drops. Number 6. It wants us to factor, so it wants to know the GCF. So first I ask myself, what's the greatest thing that can divide into 40 and 32? And the greatest thing that goes into 40 and 32 is 8. It's the largest thing that goes into both of those numbers evenly. Then I look to see what's the greatest number of f's they both have. This first one had 3 f's. The second one has 2 f's. So the greatest number of f's they both have is 2. Then I look at g's. This first one had 5 g's. The second one had 3 g's. And the greatest number of g's they both have is 3. And that is our GCF. Okay, number 7 tells me to factor completely. So first rule of factoring is to always look for a GCF first. And the greatest thing that goes into all three of those pieces is a 4AB. Every time I find my GCF, I build my parentheses behind it and figure out what goes inside. And that's your answer. Okay, number 9. I want to factor. First thing I always want to look for is a GCF, and I do have one. It is a 3. 3 goes into all of those. And then I build my parentheses behind it, and this is what I end up in the inside. From here, I ignore my GCF and I try to factor this. I look to see if it has a GCF. It doesn't. It's 3 terms, so I do A times C rooftop. What multiplies to be negative 14 that adds to be 5? That's a 7 and a negative 2. Because of the 1 in front, I can shortcut. So that would be x plus 7, x minus 2. And Mr. GCF, shoo, drop him like he's hot. Okay, number 10. I want to factor, so first thing I look for is a GCF. And nothing goes into all 3 of those. So then I see it has 3 terms. So I do A times C rooftop. What multiplies to be negative 30? That adds to be negative 1. And that's a negative 6 and a 5. This is the long one. So this is when I recopy the first term. Instead of using the guy in the middle, I use these 2 over here. So a minus 6x, a plus 5x, and I drop down the last piece. Then I look for the GCF out of the first 2 things, and the greatest thing that goes into 2x squared minus 6x is 2x. And then I ask myself, 2x times what gives that back? And that would be x minus 3. Then I look to see what's the greatest thing that goes into 5 and 15, and that's a 3. I'm sorry, that's a 5. And then whatever is here has to be here. And then final step. X minus 3 goes in one set of parentheses, 2x plus 5 goes in the other. And I'm not solving these. There's no equals, so I don't have to set these factors equal to 0 and solve. I'm just asked to factor, so that's it. Okay, number 10, first thing I look for is a GCF. What's the greatest thing that goes into both of those? And it is a 2. And then I'm left with x squared minus 36. I cover up my GCF, see if I can do any more. This here does not have a GCF, but it does have 2 terms. So I look to see if it's a difference of squares. And it is. This is a difference. These are both perfect squares. So that's the one that factors with the plus and the minus. So x plus 6, x minus 6, and Mr. GCF, shoo, drop it. All right, let's finish. Okay, number 11. I'm solving. Since this is already factored, something times something equals 0, then I'm ready to solve. So I set my first factor equal to 0, and I solve that. I set my second factor equal to 0, and I solve that. And that's the answer. Okay, number 12. It says, which equation has the solution set 1, 3? So I went ahead and I decided to solve A, and I decided to solve it by factoring. I could solve all of these by graphing. So I went ahead and I solved it. So I did A times C rooftop, what multiplies to be 3, that adds to be negative 4. That's negative 3 and negative 1. Because of the 1 in front, I can shortcut. And if I set both of these factors equal to 0, I would get a positive 3 and a positive 1, which is what I wanted. So A is my answer. But I could have graphed all of these and looked to see where they touch the x-axis, because wherever they touch the x-axis, those are also their solutions. So that's another way I could have done it. Or I could have used quadratic formula. Okay, this one does say to use the quadratic formula. Keep in mind it always has to say equals 0. And since it does not say equals 0, I had to add 3 to both sides, which gives me this. And then I identified my A, my B, and my C. A is in front of the x squared. B is in front of the x, and C is the constant. And then I do exactly what the formula tells me. And in case you don't remember the formula, it's x equals opposite of b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So that's our quadratic formula, and this is what it looks like when you plug it in and you work it out. Okay, number 14 wants me to graph. This does not say equals 0, so that's the first thing I have to do. So I add 8 to both sides. When I do that, I get x squared minus 6x plus 8 is 0. And then all I did was I put this in the y equals of my calculator. I hit graph. This is what my graph looked like. Wherever the graph touches the x-axis, those are your solutions, which are 2 and 4. Okay, number 15. I want to know how long it takes for the ball to reach a height of 64 feet. Since this is the height, I'm going to put 64 right here into the h. And then I don't like my t squared or my x squared to be negative, so I move both of these over to the left-hand side. So I added the 16t squared, I subtracted the 64t, and that gives me this equation right here. I decided to factor it, so it had a GCF of a 16. And then I factored what was remaining with A times C rooftop. Shortcut. And I set my factors equal to 0 and got 2. 3 seconds. Well, this is the time, so if this is the time, I'm going to put 3 into both of those t's. So that's what you see here. I put 3 into that t, and I put 3 into that t. And then I can work that out order of operations, or I can just put all of this right here in my calculator. Either way, I will get 48 feet. That is the height after 3 seconds. How long it's going to take for the ball to hit the ground. If the ball hits the ground, the height of the ball is 0. So if the height is 0, I'm going to put 0 right here into the h, which is what I did. I do not like my t-squared to be negative, so I move both of these to the left-hand side. So I add this, and I subtract this, which gives me 16t squared minus 64t. I decided that I was going to solve by factoring, but you can use quadratic formula. You could graph it. They have a GCF of a 16t. That's what I'm left with once I pull the GCF out. I set both factors equal to 0, and I get 0 and 4. And it's going to hit the ground at 4 seconds. The 0 is when it starts, and the 4 is when it finally hits the ground. Okay. These last two, this wants a description, a rough sketch of what growth and what decay look like. So growth looks like this and decay looks like this. Remember, something is growth if it has a base that's bigger than 1 and the exponent's positive, and the exponent has to be an x. Decay is when the base is a fraction somewhere between 0 and 1, say 1/4, or decay can happen when your exponent is negative. So these could be equations for decay, and this is an equation for growth. Okay, this last one talks about 2D and 3D movies. It gives me this equation, and it wants to know what's going to happen in week 7. So I put a 7 into that x. So where the x was, I put a 7, and I just plugged all of this in my calculator. And when I do that, this is the answer I get, and that's how many people supposedly will watch the 2D movie after 7 weeks. I wish you all the best on your 6 weeks test. I hope you do great. Smiley face. Thank you.